Okay, let's talk about networks in the brain. Everybody now has heard about the amygdala and the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, and that makes us all believe that we know something about how the brain works. But of course, it's not really how the brain works. It's complicated. But the way where we are in 2026, that may change over time, of course, is that there are three networks in the brain that determine how you deal with yourself and the world around you. The first network is called the default mode network. It's the parts of your brain that are activated if you have no external stimuli, if you just pay attention to yourself in silence and you are not engaged with anything. That's your habitual brain. That slowly forms itself, and we all have a habitual brain. When we're left by ourselves, we always think about the same stuff, we always do the same thing, more or less. And that's a habitual way of being in the world with ourselves. What is a disturbing finding in the area of trauma is that when traumatized people are not doing anything and you measure what's happening in their brain, very little happens. So when you're traumatized and there's nothing happening, you don't feel much inside. You don't experience much inside. And then when you get exposed to danger or scary stuff or things that piss you off, you get activated. And so what this shows is that when you're traumatized, you get easily activated about external situations and you feel alive when you're angry, depressed, or upset. But if there's nothing angry, upsetting, or terrible going on, you feel nothing. And so a big piece that is missing when you're traumatized is just a feeling of pleasure in your own company. And then the big question is, how do we actually help ourselves to actually be a person that is not dependent on outside stuff to make us feel better, but to actually take pleasure and joy in what we feel and what we sense. Of course, the people who have always paid attention to that are people like meditators. Of course, there's a Christian tradition of meditation, there's a Buddhist meditation, there's a Hindu one, there's a Muslim one. Every religion has a practice of meditation to help people to feel more alive as they are with outside stimuli. And so the more traumatized you are, the more likely to need to grab for outside information. So that's one network that deserves a lot of attention. And that's a network that we and other people more than I have found to be very affected by psychedelic medicines. And that psychedelic medicines can really change at the core of how you experience yourself and feel yourself. Probably more than any other method that I have seen in my by now fairly lengthy lifetime. But meditation can certainly also do it, but chronic meditation takes much longer. Breathwork can get you there to really feel the fullness of you also, but it also is much more laborious and intense. So that's one core network that we need to pay attention to, feeling the pleasure and aliveness inside of ourselves, regardless of outside stimuli. But people clearly show that the way you can build that up is through going deep inside and paying attention to your sensory input, sounds, images, smells, and whatever is out there, and to really feel sensory input into your brain and feel how vibrant and alive the world inside of you resonates with the world outside of you. When you're traumatized, that system probably is very dampened down. Why is that system dampened down? Because when you're scared, upset, and frightened, you don't want to feel that feelings in your body, and you learn to shut down your relationship to yourself. So a very core part of overcoming trauma is to reestablish a safe relationship with your own body, mind, and organism at rest. Meditation, yoga, psychedelic practices, maybe making music. Second system is what your brain selects to be relevant and irrelevant. It's called the Salience Network. The Salience Network, there's a certain sound in the air and you hear it, and your Salience Network, oh, that's not important. That's somebody just making a noise in the corridor. Another sound, you go like, that's really important, that's dangerous. When you get traumatized, your Salience Network gets messed up, and things that for other people are terribly important. You ignore it, but for other people, it's terribly scary. You don't feel it all. And minor little things make you really upset. And so how do we change the salience network of the brain so that we can say, oh, that's just somebody coughing. That's just somebody playing a noise. That's not important. How do we change that? In my experience, but I may be wrong about it, psychotherapy, talking, understanding, figuring things out doesn't really change that network. It makes you realize I shouldn't be upset by that smell. I shouldn't be upset by that sound. But you cannot organize that. The one thing that I've seen being able to do so is neurofeedback. Playing computer games with your own brain to reset your brain network, to change what it pays attention to and what it doesn't pay attention to. Maybe long-term meditation will also get us there, but it's a very important frontier in learning about trauma. What can change people's salience network? Clearly, in our study on EMDR, we clearly were able to show that EMDR can change your salience network, and a smell that used to really upset you now becomes, oh, that's a smell that reminds me of something that happened a long time ago, but my body no longer reacts as if I'm in that danger anymore. So that's the salience network. And the final network is the executive network. The executive network is that your mind decides to focus on something and then puts everything together to focus. It doesn't get distracted, and I'm not going to do anything else until I finish my little talk to you about the networks in the brain, and I won't think about whether I'm hungry or sleepy or whatever, because I need to focus on doing that. The executive network also gets really messed up by trauma. And so your mind gets hijacked all the time. It's hard to stay focused. It's hard to really finish a job. And so if you're a person who doesn't finish stuff, people say, oh, he has ADHD, or he has bipolar disorder, who has some damn disorder. No, you're unable to focus and concentrate. How do you learn to focus and concentrate? Is again by learning to focus your brain. Meditation may be helpful, but for many people, meditation can be very scary because when they meditate, they hear all the noises inside of their brain, or they feel dead inside. So how do you help people to focus? In my experience, but that's just me talking in 2026 with a limited amount of information, neurofeedback is a wonderful way of helping people to focus. The whole issue of using brain-computer interfaces to help your brain to focus, to pay attention, and to sort out what's important, what's unimportant, is a terribly important part of trauma treatment that at this point in 2026 is not yet widely used. But if you follow the Trauma Research Foundation, we have continuous updates on those sort of issues.